Welcome to the Kpopcast. On this episode, we hereby declare BTS as canceled.
Canceled. Hashtag BTS is over party.
BTS is canceled for not liking mint chocolate ice cream. I mean, how could they?
What?
Vanilla
What
ice
are we
cream
talking about?
just were like it was just unforgivable. Like, you know, they there was a line and it was crossed. And from here henceforth, BTS is canceled.
I'm burning all my albums. all of the physical albums I have purchased. Okay. My imaginary. Okay, anyways.
It hurts me to even play in this joke.
Yeah.
Right.
So, obviously...
I know, I can't keep it up. Forgive me, BTS. I can't do this.
Forgive me, Neptune.
Obviously, for this episode of the Kpopcast, we're joking here. No one is canceled. Or is someone canceled? I don't know. We're here to figure that out. What is cancel culture? What is call-out culture in K-pop? We've got an awesome crew of hosts to join us in this discussion. So I am your host, DJ Peter Lowe, and I welcome on Virginia Dewan. Thank you, Mandarin Mama, for joining us for yet another episode.
Hello.
And joining Virginia is Stephanie.
Hello, hello. I've got my cancel guns ready.
And
Pew, pew.
let's not forget G-Dragon himself. It's
Hello.
Amr. What's going on, Amr?
Not much. Thanks for having me on, even though I have no credentials whatsoever to be talking about this.
Yeah, let me just say, this was a difficult topic to broach. We actually talked to a lot of different people in the scene. We spoke to a lot of contemporaries in K-pop, and we even went to some people who published articles on this topic. And they said, you know what? I'm getting death threats on this right now. So I'm a little afraid to talk about it. But glad you guys are having that discussion. So,
Wait,
that's awful.
I'm going to get death threats because of this?
oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're locked in. You're locked in now.
You signed that in the terms
too
and
late.
conditions waiver that you didn't read when you agreed to be on the show.
Well, you know, everything's fine. That's cool.
So, I mean, in many ways, here at the Kpopcast, we're here to talk about these topics that others can't, because I don't know, I don't have a career writing on K-pop, so we're here to cover that on all of their behalf. And why are we talking about this now? Well, you may have heard this Harper's letter where it was posited that we've gone too far. And it was signed by a number of different people. And there's been very polarizing reactions to it. And during this, at least domestic national conversation on cancel call-out culture, this is no stranger to K-pop idol fandom culture. So what better time to talk about and begin critically examining what this means for us as K-pop fans and as critical thinking, responsible doing K-pop fans. How should we think about this?
Speak for yourself.
What should we do on this to be great online netizens of this topic that we love? Okay, so there's been a long history of Korean idols who have been canceled.
Yep. I think in my formative years of K-pop, I remember being just stunned, floored by what happened to Jay Park.
Yeah.
I forget what year that was. It was the mid 2000s when it was discovered that Jay Park, who was part of 2PM at the time under JYP label, it was discovered that on MySpace when he was a kid, he wrote a comment about how he was not having a good time in Korea, something like Korea is gay.
Yes.
You know,
wrote,
as
yeah,
teenage
Korea's
boys,
kind of gay,
right? As wait a minute.
With the
Don't get canceled before the episode is over.
I'm just paraphrasing. Not my sentiment.
Oh my god. Yeah, so Jay Park wrote something like that on MySpace, which, you know, from my perspective as an American young person at the time, I thought, well, people talk like that all the time. It's not nice. It's not respectful. But did he deserve to be basically chased out of the country for saying that years ago when he was a kid? Did he deserve to be kicked out of his group? He received threats. People protested him. His label immediately cut ties with him. And he flew back to the States. I mean, we all know now that he's made a triumphant return and is having a successful music career. But that really, what happened there really stuck with me as like, whoa, you need to be careful and cognizant about what you write online. It could really come back to bite you and ruin you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there other examples y'all remember of folks being canceled in K-pop?
I did read about like Tableau.
Oh my God.
And actually, it's funny because that story is what sucked me into Epic High.
Oh,
and,
really?
and what story
Yeah,
are you
it's
referring to for our listeners?
So Tableau actually graduated from Stanford a few years after I graduated from college because I'm old. But he graduated from Stanford in 3.5 years with both a BA and a master's in English.
Yeah.
And that's a short amount of time. And he also published at least maybe one or two books. And so when the Korean media, they had like propped him up as this like paragon of like, I mean, it's pretty impressive, right?
Yeah.
But then someone said that it was a lie. And then there was this like very huge online...
An anonymous, I forget the name of the account, but it was an anonymous person online who created like an anti-fan site where they published these conspiracy theories about how Tablo was hiding it all and making it all up. He was all a fake. And people
and it was to avoid like military service also.
No, yeah, the Tablo story was super impactful for me too. I was at Stanford at the time that scandal came out. Not well, he was there, but he actually came back to campus in person to film a documentary where he went around to all of his old classrooms, his old professors, being like, "Hey, you remember me, right?" And they're like, "Yeah." He made a whole film to prove that he was telling the truth, and people still didn't believe him. I ran into him in the bookstore while he was filming that. Yeah.
What?
He seemed troubled and concerned for good reason.
Right. Now,
I touched his hand.
we've also seen more
Sorry.
current examples of cancellation of idols. I can think of, just name almost any, way too many idols who have appropriated different ethnic backgrounds.
Right.
And Suli got in trouble for not wearing a bra.
Yeah.
And she was the one canceled.
I mean, when you mentioned them though, or particularly the cultural appropriation examples, what do you mean by cancel in those contexts? Because with the J Park and the Tableau examples, they both lost their jobs, lost their contracts, were driven out of the country with their family, death threats, all of that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Those material consequences came to bear on K-pop idols who had cornrows.
Yep.
Someone correct me if there's...
You are correct.
I don't think I've seen it, to your point. I can think of even really modern, current examples with ATs.
Well, even like blackface.
Yeah.
It's not like people were like fired for that.
Yeah, they just kept on going their merry way, right?
Right.
So cancel is possibly... it means a lot of things to different people.
Yeah.
It's subjective.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. So, if you get called out by somebody on Twitter, does that count as being canceled, or do you have to actually, lose your job or have some kind of consequences?
Yeah. Okay. You have to be trending.
I
okay,
think
that's helpful.
as the original authors of the Harper's letter articulated it, that it becomes mob justice, that it becomes an overwhelming, insurmountable tide of people blowing back at the offender in question.
Yes, I believe they were concerned about the fact that good, fine people were losing book deals. heads of organizations were being
really rich white
dethroned.
people.
That sounds great to me. it's in the eye of the beholder.
Those
Get
poor
out of
white
here.
people. Those poor rich white people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
But I say that, but I think there is a grain of truth to the kind of mob justice way of looking at it, even though I totally disagree with that letter on pretty much every level.
To be clear, I think everyone on this call disagrees with the letter, but
yeah, I think you can't you can't throw the word cancel culture call out around without adding who is doing it to whom, like why, and really the power relationship between the two actors.
Yes.
That is crucial.
Yep.
Cancel means nothing without otherwise.
Yes.
yeah, I wonder. There are indeed times where we needed to call out errors and mistakes. Like I can't say with certainty all the time if these were mistakes.
Yeah,
willful.
Because we could stay on the cultural appropriation
So staying on
example. I think that deserves attention.
so staying on cultural appropriation, I without knowing with 100% in certainty, I'm willing to bet that most of the time for Korean idols, it's ignorance. It's not knowing better.
Virginia is skeptical.
Go ahead, Virginia.
Okay. So, on the one hand, we cannot expect a different country to like know all the nuances of like stuff from America, right? Like, I feel like that's a fair thing to say. However, it is not like this just started happening in 2020, right? This has been happening for a really long time. So it's like, I really have a hard time buying that. Because especially since there's a huge contingent of Black K-pop fans. Like, huge. I want to say, like, a vast majority, like, I'm just making up numbers here, but, like, I want to say, like, a good portion are Black fans. All right? And so if this happened in, like, 2000...
Even if we're not the majority, we are on the top of like K-pop fan culture in terms of making content in tribute and in fan reactions to K, like Black people's reactions top all the YouTube charts.
Yes.
People want to see us cover the dances. People want to see us cover the songs.
Yes.
Like, we are a huge presence that the K-pop industry knows about, and they love our attention and our money and our engagement.
Because it's validation, right?
It's validation, yes.
It's validation because everyone knows that it's not cool until Black people say it's cool.
Hey.
Right? But then, like, no one wants to, like, deal with, like, everyone, you know what I mean? Like, no one wants to, like,
Do the due diligence.
take responsibility
of doing it,
for, right? Like, we want to steal your culture. We want to, like, be cool with you, but we don't want to be, like, cool with you.
We don't want to, yeah.
Right? Like, we don't want to stand with you. We don't want to be like, oh, our bad. Right? Like, so.
Yeah. They want the win-win, have their cake and eat it too, and that describes many K-pop fans as well. They want to just be surrounded by praise and validation no matter what they do, no matter whose culture they're appropriating and offending. It's very juvenile. Honestly, this behavior.
Is this where I go in with the But Namjoon example? Well, look, BTS themselves, like, they totally screwed it up in their earlier years. And then they were called out.
But they learn, right?
Yeah.
But they learn. Look, I am the first one to say that War of Hormone is like when you like check your feminism at the door and you're like, that's cool. Like, that's fine. Okay. I wouldn't let my daughter watch some of their like boy in love videos because I'm like, this is toxic. Right? Like, I don't want my kid to watch this because she's going to think it's cool for some boy who likes you to, like, slam you into a locker. And I'm like,
that part, yeah.
Like, that's not okay. Like, everyone's like, oh, but Jin apologized in the behind the scenes. I was like, yeah, but that's not the narrative. Right? Like, right? Like, and so, but, you know, people learn. And you know what? Fine. Namjoon checks, like, with a Korean feminist professor to make sure the lyrics, and then they come up with like 21st Century Girl, and I'm like, this is not feminism. Like, this is, I'm sorry, this is laughable. I mean, it's a good song.
They're trying.
This is like very sweet of little boys trying, but it's not feminist.
Yeah.
But like the point is that they try, right? They're like trying to learn and adapt.
I think the thing you were saying, Virginia, about they want to be cool with you, but not cool with you, is really apt. Actually, the example that comes to my mind is the songwriter, the black female songwriter on contract with SM, who did Tiffany Red. Thank you. Who didn't get paid for her work, and after trying other tactics of getting SM to pay her, she eventually took to social media as kind of like a last resort to try to get some of that money. I mean, dare I say justice, but just at least get paid for the work that she's doing. And I think that particular example illuminates a lot of different things. I'll mention a couple of them that come to my mind, which, like, one is who's getting called out most of the time, right? Because a lot of times the cultural appropriation or whatever other faux pas that happens is not actually the idol's decision, right? Or the decision of the most public facing, representative of that company.
Stylist,
it's usually a decision of
designer.
Right. And or even like further up the chain, it's usually signed off on by the producer or even like the owner of the company or owners of the brand. And so it's really hard to call those people out because they're not public. And if you try to call out the company in general, it's very difficult to make any traction on that. As Tiffany Red found out, I don't know if there's any resolution to her situation of getting paid. And so I think the second thing and the last thing I'll mention that it illuminates for me is even when, or especially when, the people with the most power are targeted by cancel culture, and even when it's used in what I would say probably the most, effective way, as a last resort by someone where there really is an extreme power imbalance, it's still not able to, get the results that actually matter.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it kind of falls short in like even in its like maybe most useful conception, it's like really ineffective.
What are the results that actually matter?
Well, change, right? Like policy change, change evolution on behalf of an individual to do something differently, to admit fault, and through admitting fault, figuring out what they can do to enable or create effective action to correct. And I mean, like what you're also hitting on, Amr, is like call out cancel culture can be a medium, a method that wasn't available in generations past to be a voice and a tool for the marginalized.
Collective action has been for thousands of years used by the powerless to like take it to the powerful. Like, oh, my internet connection is unstable. The powerful can hear me. I think this is a branch or a flavor of that, of people knowing how it feels to be more powerful in the collective. But in order to bring about the true big picture transformative societal change, you're gonna need more than a bunch of angry people speaking up on social media. On social. Yeah. It's gonna have to hit the industry, the owners, where it hurts on the inside.
Yeah.
And even like K-pop companies, they're like, why they have, I'm sure they have like consultants of all sorts. Why wouldn't they have?
What are you talking about? That's expensive. That's a cost center.
It's a cost center.
But sure, but like, at least train your stylists.
Again, that's a cost center.
Like,
what doing the right thing
that is a cost center.
Doing the right thing is costlier and harder to do.
Of course, but like, you cannot enter the global market and be a jerk about it, right? Like, you can't, like,
except you can.
Yeah.
You're doing it. You can.
You
They're
know?
doing it successfully.
But like,
I mean, what media companies are they competing against, and what is the standard that they're setting? I mean, if you look at the
American labels.
So
I don't know.
I'm all for bringing about change, right? And I'm reminded of a talk our former president Obama gave, who talks about woke activism. And he says, like, it's great that you're socially conscious and aware, and given a tweet using a hashtag and then calling it a day. That's not activism.
Yeah, it's not even activism.
Like,
Slacktivism.
I feel called out in this post. I don't know.
The point being, canceling someone just via social media isn't enough. Like, you gotta, like, if we're to be responsible fans of this content of K-pop, what more should we be doing? And I think as you're getting at, Stephanie, like, I mean, hit it where it hurts in the money. Like, demonstrate that it's no longer viable, that there are impacts from this that go beyond just a hashtag, for example.
Yes. What I'll add to that is if all of us individually, like if we think about this on an interpersonal level, or actually changing someone's mind or having them feel remorse and grow from an experience, all of us can probably think to a time when someone took us aside privately, and like someone we respect and trust told us the hard truth that we did something, we messed up. And I don't know if I don't know about y'all, but that was more effective for me interpersonally. Having trust, a foundation with trust of somebody I respect, letting me know, and being ready, being in the mindset to receive that and change and grow as an individual through that. So I think ideally, if there's no power imbalance involved, if we're talking about interpersonal, then getting an online mob to trash talk the person over there in your classroom. So just to finish my earlier point, I was drawing a distinction between how to approach someone you would like to grow and change on an interpersonal peer-to-peer level. It's going to take relationship, trust, and accountability built on trust.
Yeah.
You can't hold someone accountable if they don't agree to be held accountable by you.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So that's in the peer-to-peer interpersonal case. Like, you wouldn't ambush somebody with 10 other people in a meeting if the power between you is equal. If there's a power imbalance, if you're thinking about a CEO or someone who has power over you and other workers, for example, then anything you do to speak up or criticize them, they will say, you're trying to cancel me, you're using mob justice, my feelings are hurt, and this is not right. You should just come to me by yourself. That's how I like to be approached. But the power imbalance makes that impossible and makes them win every time.
Yeah.
They're talking to you as if this is an individual and feelings and emotion issue. Like, oh, I feel so sad that she did. But the power imbalance makes all the difference there.
Yeah.
So I want to just draw the distinction between the two situations.
That is so key.
Yeah, I would love to add to that accountability is, especially in this state that we're in post George Floyd, and we actually have abolition being talked about again and on the table, and things like restorative justice. If you're talking about accountability in that sense, then what you're talking about is growth. What you're talking about is admitting a fault and then learning and growing. And that doesn't happen on social media, right? If you're talking about getting revenge or getting some kind of like non-restorative justice, you can get a semblance of that through this kind of mob justice. If and only if it's like the marginalized trying to call out the powerful. But even then, it's not true accountability. It's not about the healing of like the survivors or the abused. It's just about mitigating the power of the abuser.
Yeah. So I
think that's important to draw.
Totally.
Yeah.
I actually want to bring up a relevant example. In K-pop, let's bring it back to K-pop, fam. So Amber Liu, she was on a YouTube channel.
Amber's canceled?
She was canceled a couple times, actually.
She was canceled. Yeah. Yes.
I think the first time, perhaps rightfully so. She was on this YouTube channel where they're talking about hot news items, and there's an example of a guy getting into an altercation with a police officer, and Amber, just a black guy. Amber says, well, he should have just paid attention to what the...
Oh,
and then like, even the people on that episode were like, whoa, hang on, Amber. Like you don't know.
Amber's canceled.
And she's like, no. And she was like really, convinced of her position. So after that published, like everyone's like, what the hell, Amber? Like, this doesn't make any sense.
Get it together.
Like, this is where you're wrong. Like, this is why it's not right. And Amber's like, oh crap, you guys. I screwed up. You're right. Like, I've got something to learn here. I didn't mean this. I think where she started, honestly, in her apology was like, I'm sorry that you guys felt that way, which is not an apology. But then, like, I think the latter half of it was like, okay, yeah, clearly I have work to do. Like, I needed to do better. And then at a later incident, she's out, like, she's marching with Black Lives Matter. She's out there. Like, she's like, I'm doing this.
Okay.
And she also demands in the George Floyd sentencing that it needs to be like first degree murder. And people are like, that's too far. It's not realistic to get passed through our justice system. And she's like, you know what, guys? Like, I'm trying to do my best here. And like, this is me, like, work with me. Like, I'm trying to learn from this past wrong. And I'm trying to make positive actions. But people are canceling her for what I guess assuming is performative action. And they did other really screwy stuff like she's pregnant. And she's like, what does this have to do with anything?
That's a new one. That's a new kind of cancellation. But it was
like a way of just like, she was trending in the news on Twitter, like internationally on Twitter, for marching with Black Lives Matter.
I didn't even see this.
Yeah, it was kind of silly.
I missed it.
But when I think of myself of like, quote unquote, like K-pop cancel culture going too far, the first instance was very warranted. And it was done from a position of, this is what you need to do. And then the accountable party being like, yeah. And then the other instance is just like, what are you even asking for?
Because it's so tough, right? Because I would say that 10 years, even 5 years, 3 years ago, I would have said, hey, if you don't want to get in trouble with the police, then don't make trouble. Because that's what we're taught as good Asian kids.
Yeah.
Don't make trouble. But like, that's what we're taught. Don't make trouble. It's like respectability politics. And it's ingrained, right? Like, that's and that's how people survive. Right? That's how you survive as traumatized people. And so I get that. And it's really, really tough to like learn in public.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I'm 42 and I'm not 42 yet. I'm gonna be in like a month. But like, it's really tough when you're backed in a corner and people tell you you're wrong and you're like, I don't feel wrong. And then you're like, well, and just imagine you're like a celebrity. Like, so like it's, I'm not saying it's right or whatever, but like
it's emotionally frustrating, triggering, hurts. Yeah.
And shame is huge, right? Like shame, and that's what canceling is, right? It's using
trying
public
to wield
shame
on somebody,
right? And shame is very powerful, and and I think in one of the articles that somebody sent was like panopticism from like Michael Foucault, and like about how like just the idea is like, oh, if you're a prisoner in a cell and you see a spotlight on you, and then like, and the spotlight represents the warden. And so you alter your behavior because you know you're being watched, even though you can't see whether you're actually being watched. But because you think you're being watched, you change your behavior to like fit the what is appropriate, and how social media is like that spotlighting, and that we have to like change our behavior. And so like that threat of shame is that spotlight, right? And you're just really scared. And then so instead you have things like, oh, if you don't say the N word, then you're not racist. If you don't say this, then you're not racist. When really it's not about words, but it's about like why you want to use the words, or like it's both like a personal and a systemic thing, right? And it's hard for us to like parse it out because we've only been taught certain things. Unless if someone's actively deprogramming you, you won't know. And then to like be deprogrammed in public is really hard. And like, you know, and it took me decades to get to the point where I'm at. And I'm still not like woke enough for some people or whatever, right? Like I only recently understood what abolish the police means, right? Like, you know, so, and or like learning certain things. And cancel culture is useful when it's like addressing imbalances of power.
Yes.
In terms of like a big entity saying like, hey, you know, you have a lot of power and there's no way like I'm going to get a seat at the table with the CEO. And there's no way, like to your point, Stephanie, like it's not the same, right? Like I can't go to the CEO of like SM and say, hey, you screwed up here, right? Like that's just not going to happen. So the only power we really have as fans is to say like, to like have a social media like call out or whatever. But in terms of like actual people, call out culture doesn't change people, right? It shames you, and it either makes you like dig in, because what happens when you're like shamed? You either entrench yourself in your original, you double down.
The double down.
Or
the fried chicken sandwich.
or you hide, or
you
like
retreat. It's you fight or flight.
And then you don't actually change, right? Because then what you take out of this is, I can't use this word.
Right.
I can't say these things. When
because
really
it's not you. It's not even you. It's your brand. Like social media is not like we're not engaging with each other, you know, in a real way. It's just the brand is being engaged.
Well,
yes. And I want to, I will push back a little bit on the second Amber example, just because, her comment that, go easy on me, guys.
Oh, yeah.
That smacks to me of that same win-win, wanting to have your cake and eat it too, wanting to make mistakes and have a vulnerable image and be praised for it. Like wanting
I could
to,
be misquoting
wanting
with
to
that,
like,
by the way. So I might be getting that wrong.
Okay. All right. I mean, just, I would bet money that some of those emotions and motivations are at play there. That in the process of being deprogrammed, as you said, Virginia, it does hurt, and you kind of just want it to stop. You want to reach a point where you're so woke that people won't touch you anymore, that people won't criticize you, that you won't have to deal with, especially Black people's anger and pain in your face. You want to just be above it as an individual, and that's not how it works, and you can't expect that. And if Black people are feeling angry and frustrated and show that to you, the most woke thing you can do is be like, thank you for showing me that. Thank you for the gift of trying to push me and challenge me. Thank you for, and I can't imagine the pain you're going through right now that makes you say this stuff. I know that that's really hard in the moment if you're feeling like attacked and ashamed and defensive and all of that, but like there is a power imbalance between an Asian American celebrity and the Black folks, regular Black folks that are dealing with all of this. So she could be better.
Yes.
Always.
Yeah. Thank you for that gift, Stephanie. like no, seriously, like that's something that we can, like even us as fans, that's something that we can think about. Like if we're ever called out, that's how we should, like, that's the question we should ask ourselves. That's
and like if I get called out, and I feel hurt and embarrassed and whatever, am I feeling this because I secretly expected praise for typing Black Lives Matter. That's not cool. Am I feeling just like emotions based on my personal pride or feeling ashamed in the moment? Like, I shouldn't dump that back on Black people who are trying to engage with me.
And like we need and this is actually interestingly, it intersects with a lot of stuff I do at my day job. So how can you label and flag to people that information is incorrect or generated by artificial intelligence and not reality? And it's hard because, like, you know, a lot of people want to be like, oh, this aligns with my view. The rest of you are all wrong. It's this conspiracy theory. I am always right. Like, I've always had it right to begin with. So how do you penetrate into that bubble? Like, what are ways you can get people to give them an out, give them a way to grow, not an out, like to not take responsibility, but I mean, give them a way to change that doesn't force them to double down on an existing conviction.
It's not up to us how they respond. Like, you can never control the response of somebody when because the feeling of being attacked is made up in your brain. Unless you're like losing your job or like some material consequence, the feeling of, oh my God, I'm being attacked or I'm being threatened is made up or determined in your own brain.
But I guess what I'm saying is, like, for those people who feel like, right, they have that, right? They have that made up thing in their own brain. What can you do to get them to come around?
You can't.
If you're a random person, it's nearly impossible that anything you say will be effective. You have to be in that person's inner trusted circle that they already respect and know you. There has to be a foundation of trust and accountability to get through to them to do something as serious as changing their personality or worldview.
And even then it takes decades. Yeah, like, man. It's hard. It's like, so I think a lot of the hard part is that it's so fast. It's so fast.
And visceral.
And, right? And then
visceral,
and social media
people are just
so
triggering
fast.
each other back and forth, triggering trauma reactions, fight or flight, not engaging at the root of anything. Yeah.
Right. And then there's this article by Adrienne Brown, I think. And she pretty much says, like, choose life. Like, choose life, choose the things. Like, it's really hard because your reaction is to, like, you don't know whether it's coming from pain or trauma, and the other person also is reacting from pain and trauma, but choose life. What does it mean to choose life in this manner? Like, I'm totally butchering her article. Like, really paraphrasing it down to, like, like it's like a bajillion words long. But it deserves a bajillion words, right? Like, but it's just, everything's so fast. And so if you get called out, you have to, like, apologize immediately. But how can you even possibly apologize appropriately if, of course, the reason why you said something was because you didn't understand it in the first place. And then now you're being called out and now you're going to react in panic. And if you apologize, it just all sucks, right? The whole situation sucks. Like, and ultimately, like, it's not this person. It's the root problem is, like, homophobia. The root problem is racism. The root problem is structural big things that we all cannot escape. And so cancel culture is useful in the sense of, like, hey, maybe you should rethink what you're saying, or, like, thinking how you think, but it doesn't allow for people to, like, have a space to react. And sometimes, even if they had all the time in the world, they wouldn't come around.
Because they're not forced to come around.
Yeah.
Right. Or like, force is hard, right? Like, you know, like, when you force your kid to say sorry. Like, I don't.
Sorry.
Right? Like, when I tell my kids to say sorry to
I'm
me,
sorry
they're like,
you felt
sorry.
that way.
And I'm like, right?
Oh no, go to your room.
Right? Like, don't apologize then. Right? And so I, in general, I try not to force my children to apologize. But, like.
And that's if you're talking about a person. If you're talking about an organization or a company, like SM, you know, or YG, or something like that, that's like a totally different ballgame.
Yeah, we didn't even mention YG Burning Sun.
Ow, ow, ow.
There's one thing I want to bring it back to that Peter started talking about, which is like, as a fan, what are the options that,
Right.
or how does this relate to me as a fan?
Yeah.
And I guess there's like two quick things that I would say. One is, as a fan, I noticed a lot of fans really want their idols to be pristine.
Yeah.
And when they get called out for something, especially by like the Black community, just saying, a lot of fans, like, as soon as the idol makes the, like, comms prepped apology, they want to accept it immediately. And then they want the Black fans to accept it as well, like right away. Like, hey, look, this is good enough, right? Cool. We're cool, right? So that's like, as a fan, I think just noticing that tendency in yourself, like, try to hold two things in your mind at the same time. Like, look, this is a person who is trying their best, who made a mistake, and it's not my position to accept the apology.
Yeah.
And then I guess the second thing I would say, and this is maybe a little bit outside of what we could do just as stands, but in our actual lives, is if we want to build the power to make structural change, then, I'll be a broken record on this my whole life. We got to get organized.
Yeah.
Right? We need community organizations like BLM and BLM groups. We need worker organizations, like unions, things like that. Student groups, all kinds of different ways of replacing like government and corporate power with people power, where we can actually be heard, where we could, for example, like if SM had a contractors union or a songwriters union, they could do something about the fact that Tiffany Red isn't getting paid.
Yeah. I want to.
I totally agree.
I'm trying to think of Guhara and Suli. Like, these are victims, in my opinion.
Of harassment and bullying.
But that's different from. I guess are we saying that's different from call out culture? Like, and in what ways is it different?
I think it depends on how you use it, right? Like, the methods are the same sometimes, right? And it evokes the same reaction sometimes. Like, like, I don't actually know if they're the same. Because we're talking about two different things, right? We're like talking about Korean cancel culture and like wanting your idols to be perfect. And then we're also talking about, which is like, can sometimes overlap with like other things, right? Like being a decent human. Like, but then there's also like cultural appropriation types of things, so like call outs, right? Like, and I don't know if they're the same or different, or if it's like a Venn diagram, how much of it is overlapping.
That's a great question. I think it depends a lot on who's doing it and why. Like, what's the issue at stake, right? If it's solely, that seems oppressive to me, and like bullying, right? It seems like anti-progress to be judging like what a woman is wearing and canceling her on that. And I think that there's something like that. There's something like Tiffany Red's situation, and then a lot of times, and then what I've experienced is the canceling of, or like what becomes really effective and is really dangerous, is in smaller communities when people of color, or like whether it's Asian American or Black or any kind of non-white, are becoming prominent, then like a white person or group of white people can't cancel that person for like similar, like really backwards reasons. The example that's coming to mind is that New York Times chef.
Allison Roman.
Yeah. That was like talking smack about some chefs of color.
Chrissy Teigen and Marie Kondo.
And then there's there's, I guess, more specific examples that probably aren't well known, where trans people or marginalized people receive, and I think are more familiar with receiving death threats and getting canceled online than actual like people with power, people in dominant groups. And that's definitely not like a case where cancel culture is like liberatory or being used for accountability?
I think power is the key differentiator.
It's the key. Right.
Like, in the case of Suli and Guhara, I mean, this was examples of people who lost their lives.
Right. And the character of the bullying and harassment they received was specifically in line with patriarchy. It was in line with like propping up the system and making the system beat down on these women and put them back into the box.
Put them in their place.
Put them in their place. Exactly.
Thank you for stating so clearly what I jumbled through.
No, it's hard.
I mean, honestly, like I wonder people who are like, my white fragility, I'm being put down. like you know, the people who are in power who are suddenly,
I'm being harassed.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, okay, homegirl Steph_Choi on Twitter. We talked about her in the BLM episode. She made some anti-black comments on Twitter. Our good friend 106 in Seoul replied to those tweets saying, hey, this sounds anti-black. You might want to check yourself. And Steph Choi then blocked all the black people she could find on Twitter, deleted her tweets, and then went around telling people that she was being harassed and bullied and that her mental health is in danger. So anybody is, all people like are out here using those words to claim victimhood when they just feel uncomfortable or embarrassed in a way. They weaponize victimhood. The same way I think the entitled rich white folks who wrote the Harper's Bazaar letter, or Harper's Magazine letter, weaponized language of we're being victims of mob justice, we're being harassed. Like, no, you're not. You're just using those words as a weapon to avoid critique and to avoid losing positions of privilege you have. Like, yeah, like you said, Peter, power is always the key. You can't talk about canceling, harassment, whatever. I always ask, like, who, why? Yeah. Who, whom, why? Before I decide whether to use that word or not, or
Perfect.
What to think of it. Yeah. From who, to whom, why?
There you go. Okay, so let's no, like that's the answer. Like, okay, K-pop fans, K-pop cast listeners, like, when you're thinking about navigating cancel culture in K-pop, ask yourself those questions. And if you get called out in things you've said or done, like, take it as a gift. Like think about it.
First, ask those questions first. Who is doing it to me, and why? Is it because I did something to uphold white supremacist capitalist patriarchy? Or hurt people in that way? I mean, maybe you won't be able to answer that, but at least attempt taking a pause before you respond, sitting with your own emotions. Okay, sitting with those emotions, talking to a friend before you respond emotionally to what you received. Take time for yourself. Ask those questions. And then it'll turn out a little better.
It's okay to be wrong.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay to be wrong, and it's okay to be like, it's okay to say like, hey, I didn't know.
Yes.
I'm learning. But just, again, like, it's okay for you to be in those spaces, but it's also okay for people to say, well, that's not acceptable. I don't accept your apology.
Yes, you
right?
can't
like,
control other people.
right?
Yeah.
And that might not be like gracious. That might not be like the response you wanted. But that's the response.
That's free speech.
You know?
Really? Like, people who are like, oh, I'm being called out for this, like, it's a cancellation of free speech. Like, no, that's free speech epitomized. Like, that is truly
that's
the
right.
public square.
And free speech doesn't mean free from consequence. It just means that the government cannot censor you. And even then, there's certain speech that is not protected. Like
hate speech.
Right? Or like calling out fire in a theater. Like, you can't, there's certain things that you can't say.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know?
And they know that. They know the definition. They're just being babies.
I don't know. Maybe they willfully
insult babies.
convince themselves.
Right, no,
of
babies
other
are more
can
mature.
feel good and validated by their police. But the one thing I came to this episode that
Yeah.
I wanted to posit and share is that everything we say has a history and a legacy. And we should be allowed to make some mistakes, but we have to take effort in being receptive and make change. So,
Ooh, aw.
Yeah.
Thanks, Peter. We have to decouple feeling embarrassed or feeling wrong or growing. Decouple that from feeling like we're a bad person, we're worthless, like, oh my God, like being wrong is the worst thing ever, or being embarrassed is the worst thing. It means that we're a bad person. Like, no, like we are all mixed bags, as Amar likes to say. We're all moving and growing, and we can't just like blow with the wind of what someone, especially a random person on social, is saying about us. But hey, who benefit? I always ask this: who benefits from those dynamics of us feeling like flung from good to bad and liking ourselves and disliking ourselves with every tweet? Who wins?
Goodbye, ever adios. What? Goodbye, ever adios. Yeah. Goodbye, ever adios. Goodbye, ever.
because we asked our listeners what they thought of this issue, I want to just read some of the comments from the community. So Bukoy Brown on Twitter said, I don't use the term cancel culture anymore. It's a catchphrase for the right wing in the U.S. to try and diminish social media's power to call out the spread of disinformation, just like virtue signaling, quote unquote, virtual signaling, and quote unquote, social justice warrior. I call it what it is, holding people accountable. And with Hallyu being international in nature, it's right to take feedback for their product. And then he also adds, that all said, it is rich for us Americans with our continued legacy of imperialism in the Korean Peninsula to have anything to say about our own practice of pumping. Cultural force-fed is now reflected back in the way that we demand be set up to our liking. Cries of appropriation are hard to defend when American cultural soft power arrived half a century before anyone heard of Hallyu. Critique and setting expectations, yes. American righteousness, no.
I mean, I'm glad he shared it. I was with him till the last part.
So something to think about. There's a, there's definitely imperialist power imbalance between the U.S. and Korea, especially in the context of the war. There's also power imbalance between Black people around the world and everybody else. Black and Indigenous people and everybody else. So we have to hold both of those.
Yeah.
And have a nuanced understanding. It's not just all or nothing, one or the other. Here's my hot take. See, that's what.
Well, that's the problem with call out culture sometimes, right? Because it's not. It doesn't allow for nuance, and the ultimate enemy is actually the lie of white supremacy. I actually hate it when people just say white supremacy. It's a lie of white supremacy, right? It's the lie of white supremacy.
You're right, okay.
And people have been like infected by it, however it has come, right? And that's the ultimate lie. And traumatized people have been trying to survive different ways, right? And if you, and you can say, yes, this is harmful, and it absolutely is. But the ultimate enemy here is the lie of white supremacy.
Always,
right?
Now and forever.
Yes.
Until
If I could just weasel in two more comments. I might edit this out. two more listener comments, I should say. Nicola Hubbard tweeted at us saying, like abuse, rape, sexual exploitation of any kind, and racist hate speech, especially with intention. Not wearing a mask is stupid. Do I think that someone should be canceled for not? Or no, necessarily depends on the situation. They add, I think it depends, especially if there is an apology. People need time to actually prove that they have changed. Honestly, in this climate, it seems like it's the worst to actually apologize than to be ignorant with the amount of hate people get. Some things are worth canceling over, though.
You're saying a lot.
I feel like that's like tone policing.
This is tough. This is tough. I mean, I only feel like we got a semblance of clarity after talking for an hour. You know?
Right.
Yeah. I'm glad we're having this conversation and that people want to engage with us.
And then one last comment from Instagram. Count of Me says, I don't support cancel culture in general, but microaggressions are not it. I think about this so much, especially as a Black woman multi-fan. It's super complicated because of the immense diversity of the community.
Yeah, we can't talk, again, we can't generalize all K-pop fans, all idols, all whatever. Like, who specifically are you talking about? What is the power relationship between the two actors? What is the race? Like, we need to know all of that.
Okay, well, that's it for the K-pop cast. Public square, free speech. Call us out.
Free speech zone.
We asked for it, I guess. And we will thank you after asking the questions that Stephanie outlined earlier. So you can get in touch with us at the Kpopcast on Twitter. You can also send us a voice memo. Just email at us at kpopcastshow@gmail.com. I'm at DJ Peter Lowe. Where can our listeners find the rest of you online? If you're willing to put yourself out there.
Come at me, bro. I'm at sparker2 on Twitter.
Oh, I'm at the Mandarin Mama on Twitter.
Wouldn't be the first time I've been canceled, but I am at Guy Dragon at the Kpopcast Slack.
Yeah, so join us on our Slack channel. A link to that channel will be in the episode description.
너와의 기억은 기다린 기억밖에 없어 난 참고 참아도 끝은 없었어 사랑한단 한마디가 듣고 싶었어 난 무심한 너의 사랑에 난 지쳤어 기분이 더러워 자존심 따버리고 전부해 서러워 내가 이것밖에 안 돼 난 두려워 사랑이 단 두 글자 가이장 난 무서워 네가 참 무서워 난 정말 재수없어 널 만날 이유 없어 너 같은 남잔 이 세상에 깔렸어 재수없어 단점을 셀 수 없어 참으면 사랑하기 시간이 너무 아까워 hate you I'm living without you I hate you I'm living without you.
The question, like, I'm also asking myself is, like, Tamar Herman, she's been canceled.
Yeah. People hate Tamar haters are replying to me on Twitter because I said congratulations on her book, and someone was like, "You mean congratulations on the lawsuit she's about to receive? You mean congratulations on writing about a band that she actually hates?" And da 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 da. I'm like, who are you people?
I mean, like, that, again, question of power. Like, it's so funny because a lot of the critiques I hear against Tamar are like, oh, she's profiting from these back alley deals. It's like, yeah, this is not a lucrative profession, let me tell you.
She's not making a lot, dude.
I don't know.
I mean, if you're gonna criticize her for stuff, it could be like, oh, maybe her coverage is not so good.
That's fair. DK TV, they've also been canceled numerous times. Although I'm not sure how I feel about that one.
I mean, sometimes Danny deserves it.
They deserve it.
And I really actually enjoy their content, you know, but like, they're people. They're gonna make mistakes, and they're gonna say,
If you choose to be out there, if you choose to be putting your opinions out there as a brand, publishing stuff, then you better be ready to receive feedback, some critique. Don't get all butthurt.
Yeah.
Like, it's not personal. People are engaging with your words or maybe what you look like. Even that's not personal. Like, they're engaging with a brand out there on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
yes,
You really need to do internal work before you put yourself out there. Like armor.
You know, the thing is, though, you always think you're ready, and then you're not.
Yeah.
You're not. No. Oh, yeah.
You're never ready. Because, like, you know, I was a blogger before this. I you know, and, like, it's not like I didn't but then the cesspool that is YouTube, like, I cannot tell you how many men. No. Like, this is a people problem, not a YouTube problem, right? Like, this is.
Well.
It can be both, I guess.
It's
But,
both.
Both?
Yeah.
Can it be both?
how many men have to tell me that, like,
Oh God.
oh, my hair is not feminine enough for me? And I was like, boy, you could never.
You could never get this.
Like, look at this face.
Yeah.
Can't have it.
Yeah. Exactly. You don't belong to them.
Hell yeah.
They're threatened by how sexy you
Hell
are and
yeah.
how confident
That's right.
you are, and that they
That's
can't own you.
Often in my day job
But you-
in public relations, I had a colleague that frankly reminded me of this. He said, like, for any brand or entity that's trying to enter the public square, right, enter into the conversation and get attention, so too that brand also carries the responsibility in responding to people being like, no, this is not right, or this needs to be fixed or addressed. Like, yeah, that comes with the responsibility of becoming
Yep.
popular. And us PR professionals need to remind ourselves of that fact.
And it's hard. I mean, I was very lucky, and I'm still very lucky to have people willing to say hard things to me. You know, and I can't say that I've responded well every time. You know?
Right.
Yeah. So a question for another
Yeah, it's a
episode
lot of work.
is,
It's a lot of work.
after we've canceled someone or something, can you still like Harry Potter books? Can you still like Kanye's music?
Right. Oh, yeah. We didn't really talk about that, but we should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let us know your
Yeah,
thoughts.
that's a good question.
Amar's catchphrase is great for
What?
this.
Which
That
catchphrase?
you have to hold two things at the
Hold two
Yes.
things at the same time.
Yeah, two things
Culture is
can be true at the
problematic,
same
right?
time.
Culture is problematic. There's no culture anywhere that is unproblematic. And we have to remember the real enemy, right? The real problem is the lie of white supremacy. The real lie is patriarchy. The real problem
Yes.
is homophobia. The real, you know what I mean? Like, those are the,
Yes.
Yes.
right? Like, so it's like,
Capitalism.
it's like when you like bondage,
Ooh.
right? Like,
Here it goes.
Yeah, right. But yeah, that's a
Right?
great example.
it's like,
Lay it on us.
Is it woke? Is it okay? Is it ultra woke or less woke? Like,
is it woke because there's consent? But then, like, if someone